This time I meet a remarkable woman who overcame neurosurgery no less than 3 times and went on to set a world record for rowing solo across the Atlantic.
For half the day, it was pretty hairy because I couldn't see Barbados and I didn't have my GPS, so I didn't really know which way I was pointing. I obviously knew that I was pointing in the west, but whether I was pointing to Barbados or not was another matter. And it gets more and more important the closer and closer you get. And then it came into sight and I could just see just on the horizon a little and I can remember looking up and going, I'm a little bit Welsh, and I went, I've only gone and bloody done it, haven't I? Like this. I was like, I can't believe you pulled this one off. So we had no wind for days and I was just there rowing and that amazing stars. And I just was like, all you could hear is just your oars going in. So if you stop, because there's no wind, there's no waves crashing, I could just hear this. And I'm like, couldn't see anything. I just know they're there somewhere. And then you kind of hear them get closer. But I imagine they went that way. And then you could hear them going off into the distance. And you're just like, that is pretty amazing.
Hello and welcome back to These Three Things, the podcast that asks which one person, place and treasured possession have made a profound impact upon your life and why. My guest today, Kiko Matthews, is a world record breaker and an environmental champion who has raised hundreds of thousands of pounds for good causes. In 2018, Kiko became the fastest woman to row across the Atlantic solo. It took her 49 days. It is even more remarkable that only a few months previously, she was undergoing neurosurgery. Since her record-breaking row, Kiko has continued to challenge herself by cycling 7,000 kilometres around the UK, initiating huge community beach cleans, and most recently walking the 3 peaks whilst carrying her daughter Ocean on her back. Kiko Matthews, welcome to These Three Things. Well, let's get stuck in with the person. I'd love to know, who have you chosen and why?
There's someone who had a very profound effect when I was a lot younger, around the age of 23, a guy called Colin Javens, who is, I was going to say, a normal guy. I mean, he is a normal guy, but he had some exceptional qualities, I think, which really impacted me at the time.
So tell me about Collins. You're 23. I take it he's a similar age. Why has he profoundly affected you? Maybe you could share some of that story.
So Colin, I met him through my boyfriend stroke fiance at the time, and they were best mates. He was born in Kenya, and at the age of 2, a very sort of sad story. His dad was a tea farmer in Kenya, and he was murdered by some locals. And they came back they moved. I say moved back to the UK, or they came to the UK. I think they had some UK roots, so came to the UK. And when Colin was 21, before I knew him, he dived into 3 foot of water in Cowes to grab a set of binoculars that someone had dropped. And he just thought, he was quite an outdoorsy type. He was just like, oh, I'll get them. Dived in, hit his head on the bottom of the seabed. It was only about 3 foot deep, and spent the next 364 days. I know it's 364 days because there was a bet that he would leave within the year. In the spinal unit at Stoke Mandeville Hospital. And him and Ben, the ex, decided over a few pints one day that they were going to drive to Kenya in a 4x4. And so I joined that trip, which was amazing. And I don't think I've ever heard Colin complain.
Right, yeah.
He was paralysed from the shoulders down. So he had sort of movement in his, I think he had one of his arms, one of his wrists he had movement in, and his biceps or his triceps, I can't remember which one of those muscles he had movement in. But basically from the shoulders down was all paralysed. And over our trip, yeah, like I say, I've never heard him complain. So that was kind of like the start of something quite, that I then took on later on in my life.
So this chap, Colin, when he's obviously recuperating in that year-long reshaping of his life, given his injury, he decides to do this journey from the UK back to Kenya, where his father was killed, raising money for what specifically, and how long did that take you, that trip?
So raising money for spinal injury related charities in the UK and in Africa, where they obviously don't have nearly the same level of sort of support for spinal injuries. And there were some incredible stories when we were out there, resilience and ingenuity as well.
Yeah.
And also to bring awareness of how when you have a spinal injury, it's not the end. Like, he really was pioneering. We had the Land Rover was all adapted for him. We took 2 Land Rovers, actually. The one was adapted for him to drive, so he drove every kilometre of the way, and the other Land Rover took us support type of thing. And yeah, we raised 500,000 in the end, which was pretty good. Yeah.
Incredible. So Colin, just tell me about the nature of him. I mean, you said that he didn't complain about anything.
No, he didn't. In Italy, he had a cup of boiling water. He was having a cup of tea in between his lap. We were going up to the shower room, and the tea was obviously splashing and had overwent the top of the travel teacup and was burning his legs. And obviously, because he can't feel anything, it wasn't until he started having some spasms and a headache that he realised something was going on. So he'd been sitting in the shower room for like half an hour with these burns. And as a result of that, he had 2 or 3 pretty large open 3rd-degree burns from Italy, which was week 2, maybe. And we were on a 6-month trip. So for 5.5 months, he was dealing with those. Like, again, never complained. And then he got pressure sores in Zambia, and we had to rest up for a month. So literally all day, every day for a month, he just went from one side of his body and rolled over and was rolled over onto the other side of his body for another hour, and then back and back and back for a month in rural Zambia. There was like nothing. We were on a farm somewhere in somebody's spare little sort of African house. And yeah, no complaints ever about any of his situation.
Honestly, it's so humbling to hear this. I mean, it really brings a lump to my throat when I think about what people actually go through.
Yeah.
And you're saying he drove every single kilometre, determined. You were the backup support car. He drove every single kilometre to Cape Town, raised over £500,000. Where is he in the world now? And how has he, first of all, and how has he gone on to shape your incredible journey of rowing solo?
He's now in, I believe it's Sicily, in rural Sicily, on some sort of doing some permaculture farm. He's either got no running water or no electricity. I can't remember which one, but it's pretty like, you know, that sort of idyllic, really basic escape life in the sort of, you know, I imagine he's got vineyards and olive trees everywhere. And he actually, which is a really lovely part of the story, is he's married to, the PA who was looking after him on that trip. So the girl who was my female partner on that, there were 6 of us. It was me and her. She ended up getting married to him at the end. So that was a lovely end to that story.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And so how is that shaped? Well, when I was really ill prior to the row, which I then did the row to raise money for the hospital. When I was ill, I just remember lying in bed thinking, and I know you shouldn't really do this, you shouldn't sort of think about other people's misfortunes, but I was thinking, the worst thing that can happen to me right now is that I die. So I had a pituitary tumour. And if I die, I won't know about it. I've done some pretty cool things in my life. I was 28 at the time. And then if I survive, the worst case scenario is that I'm on hormone replacements the rest of my life. And I was like, and if Colin can drive to Cape Town and he has got such limited movement and he doesn't ever complain, then I haven't really got anything to complain about. So I lay there and I thought quite a lot about Colin and his situation and what he'd achieved in the situation that he was in. And actually, there was going to be no problem for me when I recovered or didn't recover, however it might have gone. And that was kind of a really sort of powerful sort of medicine, I suppose, my own type of medicine. And I often reflect on how amazing he was and you know, anything can be achieved if you have the right mindset.
Well, you've proved that. I mean, to go back to the introduction and to remind the listener that you rode solo across the Atlantic in 49 days, broke a world record, and had extraordinary adventures out at sea where, you know, I was rereading your notes not so long ago when you hit the wave, and it is exactly as you see in the films when you think she's not going to survive it, and you are living proof. So you've called upon his energy in the midst of the Atlantic, I suppose, again, and said, you know, if Colin can do it, so can I.
Yeah, completely. So the row was like, I don't know if it's my personality. I look back and I think all I can remember are the good times. I remember a few sort of tears, but basically I only remember the good times thinking. But in reality, if I think about it harder, there were a lot. It was very boring, it all really links to it's all kind of links to being bored and being tired and being monotonous. And you really do have to like pick out the really sort of small good things, like a slight change in wind or just a little move on your seat, or, you know, would be a little bit more comfortable. Or I don't know, I found some sweets one day that I'd hidden somewhere and I was like, oh, I forgot about those. And I was like super excited. I got extra 2 worms from those M&S worms. What are they called? Colin caterpillars. Delicious. That was it. Yeah. You know, and when you find 2 extra Colin caterpillars and you've been, you know, rowing for 12 hours, it's quite nice. It's quite exciting.
But I love the bit when you speak about, or when you in your talk you discuss hearing the puff of a dolphin or whale just circling the boat, and you're in the middle of absolutely nowhere with just this canopy of stars above your head, and the silence is extraordinary. I mean, not many of us can say that we've experienced that, Kiko Matthews.
No, there's not many, I have to say. But the idea of being on my own. Because interestingly, as the story went, that I met the guy whose boat I ultimately used. I'd met him like a year before I decided to row the Atlantic. And when I first met him, he was going, oh, you should row an ocean. I was like, no way, I'm not getting in a boat with 4 people. Because I'd done this overland trip with, you know, 6 people, and it was very confined, and it was difficult. And you have like people's personalities and tired and all these sorts of things to deal with. And I was like, I've done that. I can do that. I'm not doing it in a boat when you're like halfway across the Atlantic and it all goes, you know, wrong. And there's no way I'm going in a one person, because that would be so lonely. And like, what if this happens and you're on your own? And so I'd had all this. So I wasn't going to row an ocean because I didn't want to go in an enclosed, confined place with 3 other people. Well, I certainly didn't want to go on my own. And then after a year, things changed, and I can talk about that. But I was like, yes, I'm going to go on my own. And I'm so glad I did, because those moments that you talk about were just like the most special things you could imagine. Like, yes, it'd be nice to share that with people. It's a different experience, but to be there, that particular one you're talking about with the dolphins, must have been about 4 o'clock in the morning. So it was dark, and it was a patch where there was no wind. I had no wind for felt like an eternity. And wind is really important to help you along to Barbados. So we had no wind for days, and I was just there rowing and that amazing stars. And I just was like, all you could hear is just your oars going in. So if you stop, because there's no wind, there's no waves crashing, I could just hear this. And I'm like, couldn't see anything. I just know they're there somewhere. And then you kind of hear them get closer. And then I imagine they're going in the same direction as I was going in, because otherwise they would be swimming against things. But I imagine they went that way, and then you could hear them going off into the distance, and you're just like, that is pretty amazing.
I remember it so clearly. I just had my daughter, and I remember feeding her one morning, turning on the BBC News, because all of our friendship group was saying, she's about to land. She's coming in, you know, this is the last few minutes. And I put on the BBC News, and I had my baby in my arm, feeding her, watching the TV thinking, oh my God, Kiko's done it. She's done it. And we had this insane sort of, it was electrifying. And I remember it still in 2018. So, God only knows how your parents were and how your whole family was in Barbados on the sidelines, waiting for you just to come into view.
It's one of those weird things. You kind of set out to do this thing, but are you going to do it? Is it going to happen? There are lots of things that can stop it from happening. And I remember when I was coming in on the last day, I'd had all these things. My GPS had gone down that day, so I had no. I actually thought, which today is not such a weird thought, but I thought that someone had cut all the satellite communications to someone like Elon Musk, who I didn't know. He probably did exist, but I don't know. I was like, maybe Russia has cut all GPS signal from, and I was like, said to Angus, who's my, why is my GPS not working? Has something happened in the world? Or he's like, no, why? And I was like, because I don't know where I'm going anymore. So for half the day, it was pretty hairy because I couldn't see Barbados and I didn't have my GPS, so I didn't really know which way I was pointing. I obviously knew that I was pointing in the west, but whether I was pointing to Barbados or not was another matter. And it gets more and more important the closer and closer you get. And then it came into sight and I could just see just on the horizon a little and I can remember looking up and going, I'm a little bit Welsh. And I went, I've only gone and bloody done it, haven't I? Like this. I was like, I can't believe you pulled this one off. Oh. Because, I mean, your audience may or may not know, but I wasn't a rower and I'd never been to sea until I rowed out of the harbour in Gran Canaria. I'd never been in an open ocean. I'd been Southampton was about as sort of open as it got. I pulled it off. I did really it wasn't in the bag. And then I could see this flashing light on, as I got closer to Barbados, I could see this flash on the top of the land. And I was like, oh, that's cool. And then I heard that was Mum and Dad. And I think my brother went over with one of his kids. He's got 4, so he went with one. And that was cool. That made me well up a little bit. But then the worst bit was I got to Barbados and there was a boat there to take me in. But I hadn't crossed the official finish line is all the way around the other side of the island. Because if you imagine, I'm coming in from the windy side, right? So the port is on the calm side, which is the other side around the island. I then got to row, which felt like an absolute eternity, for 2 hours around the coast of Barbados to get to the finish point. And I was like, I had finished when I had seen the mirror about 4 hours ago, or actually when I'd seen Barbados, I was like, yes, I'm there now. Great. And then I had this I think there must have been a tide or I don't know, but it just felt like an absolute. By the time I got there, I was, the kind of whole, I finished. It's sort of finished already. So it was a slight anticlimax because I'd had that yes when I saw the pilot boat, and then it was just this traipse into Port St. Charles.
And you knew you'd broken a world record in the boat at that time, or not until you got on land?
So it was a week because I took a week off the record. So for quite a few days, if all went well, then I knew I was going to get the record. But when my GPS stat went down, I was like, well, all is not well quite yet. So I've still got to get myself in because you've only got to miss, your turning point by so many hundreds of meters or whatever to then not be able to turn to get back in. And if you can't turn to get back in to that finish line, you're heading for Miami or somewhere or the next island or whatever it is in order to, because you can't just turn these boats back round and row into the wind. It's they're not designed to row into wind. So it's not until you literally pass that finish point that you are safe.
Wow. Incredible. Let me take this moment, if I may, to segue over to your place. I'm not sure it is Barbados, but where is that one special place that Kiko Matthews has chosen that makes her happiest than anywhere in the world?
Now, this was difficult because I was I've had 42 addresses since I was 18. I think I've been to a similar number of countries. I do not stay put. I have I get a 2-year itch, so I sort of move when I get to 2 years. I am the least sort of attached to things, which is why these two questions are quite difficult because I'm sentimental and me don't really go hand in hand. I just enjoy now and then. So I was like, where is my most important? I was like, do you know the one thing that I always love? And that's my bed. I love bed. And then I kind of reflected a bit more on it. I was like, it's actually, what a great place. I love it. I love my bed. But it has sort of 2 things for me. One is because I've been in so many places, it's that feeling of bed I carry around with myself everywhere. It's that is where home is. I can literally make my home overnight in somewhere when I'm in a bed, whether it's on the floor on a camping mattress, whether it's in a boat, whether it's this house that I'm living in. So that my bed is the actual physical thing wherever I'm sleeping is special. But the reason I love it is that you can sort of lie there and reflecting on what you achieved or what you've been through that day. You've got the future literally like minutes away, because the minute you shut your eyes, you've got like, you're going to wake up and you've got the future ahead of you in no time at all. But then you've also got the present and the comfort and like relaxing, nice sort of moment of present. So in a very short space of time, you can really kind of span those three aspects of, I guess, life, isn't it? Past, present, and the future.
Yes, quite. And knowing you as I do, with everything that you've been through, well, particularly with the Cushing's disease, but then the row and then the cycling around Britain, doing these huge community beach cleans, and then your trip obviously to New Zealand and back, and recently the 3 peaks carrying baby Osh on your back. And everything that you've done, I bet when you lay your head down at night, you go to sleep like that and you sleep.
Yeah. Most of the time I do. I've always been a good sleeper, to be fair. I remember when I was 4 or 5, I was in bed at 4:30 or 5 at the same age, same time.
Yeah.
And I love that kind of, you're basically just refueling, aren't you, for the next day of whatever it might bring you.
You strike me as someone who's really able to be in the present, though. I know from your challenges that you've always taught me, you said, I just have learned not to worry, because what will worry bring you? And you really were my teacher in this, Kiko. You used to reaffirm all the time, just control the controllables, because what's worry going to bring you? We spend so much time in our heads overseeing and foreseeing the potentials of what if it happened, and you don't have that in life. You've just gone, well, the worst has kind of come to me in many different shapes and sizes, and I'm still here. And I'm sure Colin, as you say, was the instigator for this mindset. But that attitude of just roll with it and it'll be okay. That's a gift to have, right?
Yeah, I think it's always difficult to know whether, there's probably a bit of personality type in there, and there's a upbringing, and then I've spent a lot of time, I don't really reflect, but I obviously have reflected, but without I don't sit down and go, right, I'm going to do some reflections now. I think the first time that I really consciously thought about the worrying thing was when I was lying in bed in hospital, and Mum was sitting by my bed looking like she was so worried about me. And I was just like, you're not helping situations, because there's nothing that we could, I don't want, imagine if I die, Mum, and you're sitting there and this is your last resounding, whatever that word is, moment of you being so worried. It's like, you can't do anything about it. Like, the doctors are going to do their best and I'm doing my best, which is to try and be just, as I say, normal. But I was so off the scale of not being normal when I was unwell, because my pituitary tumor was making me so I was trying to be as normal as I possibly could. But the idea of worrying was just, I just need to not worry and not, I don't think the control thing came in at that point. It was definitely just the worrying, because I can't do anything about it. And actually, I just wanted to save my energy to, fight whatever I'm going to need to fight, or to get better, however much I need to get better, whatever it is. Like, I need all the energy. And our brain is the biggest energy user of, somewhere along with our gut. So when we're worrying, we're thinking, and those thinking things take up energy. All our thoughts is energy consuming, whether, we're doing revision. You remember when you're doing A-level revision or whatever revision, just you get so tired and you don't do anything. Like, you think you haven't done anything, but you're exhausted because your brain is just constantly going. So the more you worry, there goes your energy. You need that energy to get better or to overcome whatever is, about to happen. And that worry will not change the outcome of the thing that you're worrying about. It will just make you tired when you face it. So it takes training. It's not something you're just born with. So I always say, I liken it to getting a 6-pack in the gym. So physical health is really so much easier because you can weigh yourself. Your jeans don't fit, or they do fit. You can run, you can get a personal best, or you get faster, or you get slower, or you get a 6-pack. You can see physical health like with data. Mental health you can't see. So the idea of working at your mental health is like, well, how do I don't understand how I can see that my mental health is improving through these practices. You know, it can take a real time for you to go, oh yes, 2 years ago I was like this. So you can you can, but it's a lot more difficult to go to the gym for your mental health, should I say. But it 100% you can train your brain to not worry.
Well, just learn to meditate. There we go. Just learn to meditate. And I think between the hours of rowing out at the Atlantic, or the 5 marathons you did in the desert, or the 7,000 miles on a bike around the UK, you have had some quiet time to yourself to just meditate and maybe just say, Hakuna Matata. I'm not having it today. I'm not going to use that time to worry.
Hakuna Matata, yeah.
Okay, let me segue now onto your treasured possessions. So this question is as simple as, you know, if you were stripped of everything, what one belonging or item would you take with you?
Again, a really difficult one because I spend my life trying to chuck stuff out. I am, like I said, so unsentimental. I have to go, oh, will Ocean want this in years to come? I better keep that. Okay, I better keep that. So I don't have a physical treasured possession.
Okay. Interesting. What have you chosen?
Oh, and now I've just had a little thought. I do like my ability to just whip up a big pot of food. I quite like that. But I think what I'm actually going to go for is and I don't want to use the word resilience, so my positive attitude to life, or my ability to not get stressed, that sort of like well-being characteristic. I don't know exactly how you...
a mindset, an attitude to life.
A mindset, yes, thank you. Attitude to life.
So your most treasured thing is your positivity. And your ability to look adversity, I suppose, face on and just say, it can't defeat me. Am I right?
Yeah, pretty much. And that came after my first little bout with near death. I decided I wanted to live my life and give back. So I have living and giving, or live and give, or whatever it is. So I like to spend my life living it as much as I can and giving back. And I think those two things bring in that sort of positive mindset.
Living and giving. Wonderful. When have you most recently been tested with having to apply that positive mental attitude?
Well, I mean, it's just endless. Well, yes, mother on a daily basis. Mummy. No, that's just gosh. So I've been recently diagnosed for the 3rd time with my pituitary tumour. So that's sort of, oh, well, here we go again. At least, hopefully now the weight that I've put on, I will lose when they take the tumour out, because the tumour makes me put on weight. So I'm like, that's my positive attitude. Oh, I get a week off work for the operation. That's another good thing. But you know, now that it's the 3rd time, I'm just like, oh, right, it's here again. Like, and in my eyes, with illness, the best thing is getting diagnosed, because the illness is going to be there whether you're diagnosed or, like, you know, if it's there, it's there. Getting diagnosed just means you're that much closer to getting rid of it, or like trying to deal with it. So for me, having another diagnosis, I'm just like, oh, again, here we're going to get through it. So I don't feel like that's a real, I mean, it doesn't help because it doesn't make me feel, I'm working on less cylinders than I would normally be. So that kind of makes it physically a bit more difficult.
I can only say, you know, I know that you climbed the 3 peaks. I was watching you avidly this summer and supporting you, and that you did it with this gorgeous little girl strapped to your back, and took her up and took her down, and then traveled to the next one, and again raised an incredible amount of money, and had that positive mental attitude with you all the way through.
Yeah. I mean, it was a lovely thing to do with her, and she's so little still. I mean, she's 3, but she's little. And I want her to be able to be part of my living and giving. That was like really embedded, those living. I was really living it with her, and hopefully for her. I don't know if she'll remember it, but what I kept saying to her was like, Osh, I'm taking you up now. You got to take me up when I'm like in my 70s. There's going to be payback. I'm not doing this just for the love. You'll be taking me places when I'm old and frail.
Well, Kiko Matthews, I think you are living proof you are the pinnacle of what it means to overcome and keep going and stay grateful. Thank you so much for saying yes to being a guest. I hope you've enjoyed the process.
Thanks for having me. Yeah.
Well, I'll be keeping our listeners updated on your speedy recovery and full recovery. So here's to you, Kiko Matthews. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you. Thanks, Debs.
And thank you for joining us today for another episode of These Three Things. If you have particularly enjoyed this conversation, please do share it with a friend. Press subscribe or follow on your preferred platform. And if you have an extra minute, a comment or review is greatly appreciated. We release episodes every fortnight. So until next time, thank you and take care.